Hello, welcome to this video. I am Noah Morgan. This video is the first in a series of videos on Presbyterian belief and practices. This first video addresses the question, what does Presbyterian mean? Before we begin, I'd like to direct you to the description box down below where you can find a link that will take you to a web page which will have an outline for this talk. So I'd first direct you there before you continue the video. So what does Presbyterian mean? Many of you might have heard of Presbyterian churches. You might live near a Presbyterian church. You might even go to a Presbyterian church. But the question continues to be asked, what does Presbyterian actually mean, and what makes it different from other Christian churches? The Presbyterian Church has a long history here in this country, in the United States, but it actually originates in Europe, comes out of the Protestant Reformation. So as most of you know, the Protestant Reformation during the 16th century was in response to corruption found in the Roman Catholic Church. It began in 1517 with Martin Luther nailing the 95 Theses to the church door at Wittenberg. So the aim of the Reformation was to root out corruption and bring the church back in line with what some saw as the original teachings of the Bible. The motto of the Protestant Reformation is post tenebras lux. So that means after darkness, light. So the idea was that before the Reformation, the Christian world was actually in darkness because they had fallen away from the true teachings of the Bible. But with the Reformation came new light as we went back to the original teachings of Jesus Christ. So during the Reformation, there were many reformers, Martin Luther, Zwingli, but one in particular, John Calvin, started a movement, a Reformation movement in Geneva, Switzerland. He formed the Protestant church in Geneva. John Calvin was one of the most influential reformers besides Martin Luther. His thought, John Calvin's thought, was developed into what today we call Reformed theology. Some people call it Calvinism or Calvinistic theology. However, Calvin never called it that, and that's a modern term. So in Geneva, John Calvin trained pastors and missionaries, which he then sent out to the rest of Europe to spread the Reformation, to spread Reformed theology, what they saw as biblical theology, and to call people to the gospel, to the true gospel. One such pastor that John Calvin trained was John Knox, and he was involved in the Reformation in Scotland. He studied under Calvin and brought the Reformed church or Reformed theology to Scotland. John Knox established the Protestant church in Scotland, which had a Presbyterian form of government. We'll get to that later. The Protestant church, which John Calvin started, then replaced Catholicism as the national church and actually remains to this day. The Protestant church in Scotland is called the Church of Scotland. Then we move on to Presbyterians in America. So from Scotland, the Protestant church, which was Presbyterian in government, sent missionaries, but also Scottish immigrants as they were coming to this country to find new opportunity, brought along with them their church beliefs, which include Reformed Presbyterian theology and the church. The first Presbyterian church in America was established in the 1600s. Fun fact, the only minister to sign the Declaration of Independence was a Presbyterian minister. So during the Civil War then, the Presbyterian church split, just as the North and South split the Presbyterian Church split north and south, and they didn't reunify until June the 10th, 1983. So that's sort of a really quick run through of the historical lineage of the Presbyterian Church. When I say Presbyterian Church, however, there isn't just one Presbyterian denomination, especially in this country. Today there are a plethora of Presbyterian denominations, including the Presbyterian Church USA, the Presbyterian Church in America, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, the Evangelical Presbyterian Church, the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and many more. However, when I say Presbyterian Church, I'm talking about the realm of thought, the theology and the practices that come along with it. So, being Presbyterian has a historical lineage, but it also has some theological distinctives. And so there are a couple of those, and it's sort of, the categories go in this order, from a very broad category, and it gets specific as it goes down with each category, and as it goes down, the definition becomes more specific and precise. So our first head category is Catholic. Catholic. So you see the C there is not a uppercase C, it is a lowercase c. So I don't want you to confuse Catholic with the Roman Catholic Church. When I say Catholic, lowercase c, I'm referring to the universal church. And so with this theological distinctive describes doctrines that form the common foundation for all true Christian churches. It also distinguishes Christianity from other religions. And so some of those doctrines include the Trinity, how God is three persons but one God, the Incarnation, how Jesus is fully man and fully God, and Jesus' death and resurrection, what was accomplished on the cross. And so these doctrines form the foundation of the Christian faith. And so to be a Christian, you have to believe in these tenets. You can find these tenets in such documents such as the Nicene Creed or the Apostles' Creed. These were statements by the early church and by the church fathers describing Christian belief that many churches proclaim to this day. So when we're talking about Catholic, this includes Roman Catholics, Presbyterians, Methodists, Lutherans, anybody who hold to those common foundational beliefs. From there, we get one level down, more specific, Protestant. The Presbyterian Church is Protestant. Of course, we know that this term originates in the 16th century with the Reformation, and it comes from the word protest. So they were protesting against the Roman Catholic Church. So Protestant describes the Christian theological position of the authority of Scripture, of the Bible, and justification by faith alone. So these two doctrines separate Protestant churches from the rest of Christian churches, or even from our last category, from the rest of Catholic churches. So within this, Protestant definition includes all Christian denominations except for Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy. From there, we go down another level, Reformed. The Presbyterian Church is Reformed. So this term originates in the Reformation movement led by John Calvin during the 16th and into the 17th centuries. The term Reform designates a branch of Christianity that embraces distinctively Reformed creeds and confessions. So that includes the Heidelberg Catechism, the Belgic Confession, the Westminster Confession. And so this is a distinct theological position that holds to specific doctrines, specifically God's sovereignty, how God rules and governs creation, the doctrine of predestination, how God works in salvation, in saving our souls, the doctrine of grace, the other doctrines of grace, which are sometimes put into the phrase TULIP, T-U-L-I-P, which are total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. And so these doctrines are distinct to Reformed churches and are found within Reformed confessions. And so Reformed includes all Presbyterian churches, but also all Reformed churches, like the Reformed Church in America. So from there, from Reformed, we go to Presbyterian. The Presbyterian church is Presbyterian. It comes from the Greek word presbyteros, which means elder. And this term Presbyterian first and foremost refers to the system of governance of the church. And so here's a church word for you, polity. Polity refers to church governance. So all churches have a polity. The Catholic, Episcopal, and Lutheran Church have what we call an episcopal polity, which describes bishops and a hierarchy. Baptist churches have what we call a congregational polity, which means that everybody is involved in the decision makings of the church. But for the Presbyterian church, our polity is based around elders. So elders are elected by the church to lead that local church with the pastor to do the work of ministry and in the everyday life of the church. And so the body of elders in a specific local church is called a session. Then those individual churches are represented in a regional body called a presbytery. And then presbyteries elect representatives to a national body, which is sometimes called the General Assembly. So in many ways, it's like a representative government. Fun fact, the U.S. government is actually based on the Presbyterian form of government, that system of elected officials. Now, Presbyterian refers to the governance, first and foremost, but secondly, it refers to a distinct doctrinal standard, and that doctrinal standard is called the Westminster Standard. And so that includes the Westminster Confession of Faith, the larger catechism, and the shorter catechism. And so this is basically a statement of belief. The Westminster Confession is a statement of belief, and the catechisms are question and answers based on the confession to teach the faith. And they define what we believe as Presbyterians. And so the Westminster Standard is historically distinctive to Presbyterian churches. And so within this category, Presbyterian, with this standard, it includes only Presbyterian churches. So let's go over our categories again. Again, going from very broad description to very specific. Our first was Catholic, lowercase c, meaning universal, talking about the common foundational doctrines of the church. Our second was Protestant, which speaks about the doctrine of justification by faith alone and by the authority of Scripture in the life of the church. Our next category was Reformed. Reformed referring to specific Reformed creeds and confessions, the system of thought which was developed by John Calvin, but then specific doctrines like predestination or the doctrines of grace. And finally, Presbyterian, talking about church governance, a Presbyterian polity, but also the specific doctrinal standard of the Westminster Confession and the larger and shorter catechism. And so, as we have gone through, the Presbyterian church, whatever Presbyterian church you belong to, is Catholic. The Presbyterian church is Protestant. The Presbyterian Church is Reformed. And the Presbyterian Church is Presbyterian. And so that's basically what Presbyterian means. It has a historical lineage, but it also constitutes a specific and distinct set of theological beliefs and positions. If you want to learn more about any of these subjects, I have a couple resources to recommend to you. First and foremost, if you want to know more about the history of the Reformation, but specifically the Reformation in England and Scotland, I would recommend this book, Reformation, The Dangerous Birth of the Modern World by Harry Reid. This is a great book because it specifically talks about the Reformation in Scotland, and so you'll get a lot of John Knox, but you also get that overview of the rest of the Reformation with Martin Luther and John Calvin. If you want to know more about Presbyterian history, specifically in this country, I recommend this book, A Brief History of Presbyterians by James Smiley. This book is very brief, as you can see, gives an overview of the Presbyterian Church in the United States of America. If you want to know more about the Reformed faith, or what makes Reformed theology distinct from other forms of theology, I'd recommend this book, An Introduction to the Reformed Faith by Donald McKim. This gives a great overview of the distinctives of Reformed churches, not only Presbyterian churches, but Reformed churches all over the world. And finally, if you want to know a little bit more about Presbyterianism in both its beliefs and practices, I'd recommend this book, Presbyterian Questions, Presbyterian Answers by Donald K. McKim. This one will give you a brief overview of some specific beliefs and practices of the Presbyterians. Thank you for joining me in this video. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos on Presbyterian belief and practice.